On today's episode, we are so lucky to have a local Arizona County Sheriff come chat with us. With human and drug trafficking as high as it is in Arizona, we thought it would be a great informative show to bring on someone who is in the thick of it all. Mark Lamb, commonly known as America's Sheriff, is a no-nonsense, common sense, and patriotic sheriff that is friendly to his county residents and tough on criminals. He has written a book aptly named American Sheriff. So if you want more information on Mark's history, please consider purchasing it and supporting this hardworking sheriff. Bridget and I were blessed to meet Mark at my church's trafficking event a few weeks ago and watch him speak. This should be a real treat for our listeners. However, I want to caution some folks with young ears in the room. This content may get intense. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those who don't live in Arizona or even in our country, because we have some of those, can you describe Pinal County?
Yeah, and thank you so much for the intro. I really appreciate it. And for the plug for the book too. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
It's a great book.
They can get on Amazon or they can get on americansheriff.com or even my wife's site, sheriffswife.com. So awesome. Yeah, Pinal County, we're between Phoenix and Tucson. We're approximately 5,400 square miles, which is the size of the state of Connecticut. There's about close to 500,000 residents that live in the county. And so very diverse. We have some mining areas. We have right up next to Phoenix. We've got the top end of Tucson. We have the I-8 and I-10 corridors, and why that's important. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But yeah, we're a large county, third largest county in the state of Arizona, which only has 15 counties. And for those people outside of the country, the sheriff is an elected official. So it is your only elected law enforcement official that serves in our community. So different from a police chief that's hired by a city council or a town council, we are elected by the people, for the people, to represent the people, to protect them. Like I always explain, to protect them from the bad guys, to also protect them from government overreach as well. That's what we're here for. So I'm excited to be on the show today. Hopefully we can give your listeners some good information and hopefully they'll take something away from this.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Really quick, can we go into a little bit of your background? Because you've worked some big cases, and not just locally, like you've touched cases on the federal level, as well as the RICO case that dismantled a huge corruption of the East Valley, if I'm not mistaken. So can we just go into a little bit of your background?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hawaii. Then when I was 11, we moved to the Philippines, and then back to Arizona, which is where my dad was from. And then I also lived in Panama and Argentina. So I've lived a lot of different places. Believe it or not, I never thought about being a police officer. It never really crossed my mind. It wasn't something I grew up wanting to do. It wasn't until I was 33 years old that I decided to go on a ride along with my neighbor, and came home from that ride along. It actually had to do with a case that involved a younger girl. It was a 14-year-old girl. Dad caught her with a 20-year-old boy. Dad got in a little scuffle and then the boy ran out. So we showed up and we're now looking for this guy. And I'm armed with courage and a flashlight out there in the desert, out on the reservation. And then we see this old, like abandoned little travel trailer out in the back in the desert. And I see what I think is like a quarter size of skin underneath all this trash and clothes. So I'm like, hey, I think this guy's right here. Yeah. So they get in there, they drag him out. And that morning I came home and I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to be a cop. So I put in my application, and honestly, I think it was such a blessing because I found this profession that I truly do love. And I think it gave me an advantage to come into it a little bit older. I had 5 kids. I was all about just getting to work and trying to accomplish something. I wanted to make a difference. I was fortunate enough to start on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, and gang activity was very, very high there. They had a lot of gang problems. And so I got assigned to the gang and drug unit early on in my career, and I got assigned to drive-by shooting cases. And we saw some patterns. I started reading through all these cases, looking at the different evidence, pulling them all together. And we realized that one gang was predominantly the aggressors in all this. And so we ended up targeting about 30 of them initially. We've narrowed it down to 15. And we just started going after these guys, finding cases where they had been maybe charged in Scottsdale or Mesa.
Yeah.
And like you said, we put it together a conspiracy and a RICO case. Just to give you an idea how effective it was, in 2009 in Salt River, we had 76 drive-by shootings.
Wow.
In 2010, once we started working this case, we had 10. In 2011, we had 0. And in 2012, when I left, we had 0. So we were very effective. We really did dismantle this gang, which was one of the more violent gangs in the East Valley. So we were very fortunate, and it was a lot of work. We did a lot of federal search warrants, federal testimony. It was a big case, but you know what? I learned a lot from it, and it was honestly something that really kind of helped me catapult me, and also helped me as I took on this new position of sheriff.
Wow.
And so people realize that it's not just I found the bad guy, I'm going to go arrest him and take him down. This was a years-long project to get to this point. And so you see it on the news, like, well, why can't they just arrest him? Well, it's not exactly how it works.
And it's not like, what are the shows, Law and Order or NCIS,
right. Wrapped up
where
in
they
60
go in
minutes.
there and they solve the show in 45 minutes or solve the crime. No, anytime you're dealing with a big case like this, it is years. And I think this case from start to finish probably took 2-3 years. And we did that on the quick. If you get involved with some of the federal agencies like the FBI and stuff, they'll drag it out even longer. But it's a lot of work, and we were able to be successful. We did it in conjunction with Mesa PD, Department of Highway Safety, the troopers, they were involved with it. We had some involvement from some of the other local agencies, but there was no way we could have done it ourselves.
Yeah, I want to go into as far as like even shows and then lead into the border situation, as well as defunding the police. So the American Sheriff Network, you are very transparent. You show the ride-alongs, you show what you guys are dealing with. So I love how you're very transparent and all about accountability. So going into that, I want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing at the border, just because so many people, especially us living in Arizona, don't understand that there's many parts of trafficking and the drugs in Arizona and our border situation. Can we just go into what that looks like and give a perspective for our listeners?
Absolutely. I hope that people will take away from this, because this is not a political thing. The border crisis is absolutely a crisis. Please do not let the mainstream media or politicians in Washington tell you otherwise. We are fighting it on the ground level here, and it's absolutely a crisis, and it will be a crisis for the American people for a long time with what they've already done. And they have no intentions of fixing that problem. This shouldn't matter whether you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're an independent, or what party you are from. If you care about human beings, you should absolutely care about border security. I'll tell you why. Because the cartel is abusing people on a daily basis. They rape the women. They use the children as pawns and oftentimes abuse the children. Those children who they've oftentimes purchased from families under the threat of physical harm or death. They purchase those children, they steal the children, and then they involve those children in their operation. And then they extort them in and force the men and women to carry drugs into this country as well. And when you get into the drugs, that's a whole nother piece that is affecting the American people here in our country and in our communities. So this is not about immigration anymore. This is about human trafficking and drug trafficking into America, and all of the evil that comes with those things. That is why we fight so hard. And I'm appalled by anybody who would want to stand against securing our borders, because they are, in essence, they are complicit in the continuing of human and drug trafficking into this country. Young people are dying every day. Middle-aged people, elderly are dying at the hands of fentanyl, methamphetamines, other drugs, and women are being abused. Women are being trafficked all over this country. So yeah, As you can see, I'm very passionate about it because I'm tired of listening to people try to tell the American people that it's not a problem
Right.
when it absolutely is. And we should all be beside ourselves with what we're seeing from the lack of work from our government on this topic.
Yeah,
Completely agree.
I have family and friends in Wisconsin. And so they're so far from the border that they only hear what's on the news. And so then they're like, well, it's not that big of a deal. No, really, the border is like 3-4 hours from where I currently live. That's not very far. And these poor children are being brought across. And again, and I want people to imagine their own children looking at 10, 11, 12, 13, up to 16, 17, whatever we are. They've been taken from their family. They don't speak English because I'm sure they've never been taught it in wherever they are. And now they're being brought across to do the job of bringing drugs in here, pretending to be a family, acting like they're part of this group. And then they're just left in a city. And so either they get put into foster care, where who knows who now is their foster parents, that they just are part of the cycle and now they're being abused, or they're just left to roam around. Could you imagine? I couldn't even imagine my 13-year-old son walking around Phoenix, and he lives in Phoenix, much less dropping him in a totally different country and hoping he survives. The boy can barely make a bowl of cereal to save his life. What in the hell? So this isn't like you said, this isn't a political thing. This is a humanitarian thing. This is really happening to little kids. And I have a neighbor who's in the Army and he worked Border Patrol. He said he'd rather go back overseas than work Border Patrol. It's that bad.
Oh, it's so bad. And you mentioned Wisconsin. Most of America thinks this is a Southwest border issue, an Arizona issue, and those things. But I will tell you, for any of your listeners not in Arizona or Texas, those drugs and those people are not designed to stay in Arizona, not in my community. You can go back east, and sheriffs back east will have more illegals in their jails than I do in mine. And I'm right here 60 miles, 70 miles off the border on the south end of my county. So this is not an Arizona problem. Like those in Wisconsin, they'll get more money for their drugs, or in Illinois or in Iowa or North Carolina. These are places that they want their drugs to get to, and they're trafficking it across America. The reason why Americans have not figured this problem out is because your government is hiding it from you by busing everybody all over the country. What they've done is if you just had 1 million people, which they've estimated that already 1 million people have come in here, they've got 1 million people that they've caught. So you estimate, let's say 1 million people come in. Let's just take 100,000. If I took 100,000 people and put it in a city, you would know immediately. Mm-hmm. But if I take that 100,000 people and I distribute them all across America, you don't notice it. Nope. And Americans aren't noticing it. But I will tell you, it's impacting your community, whether it's through drugs, the human trafficking, it's in your community, whether you want to believe it or not. And it is not an Arizona problem. This is an America problem. And Americans need to wise up real quick to what your government's doing and start pushing back, because it's going to kill us.
Yep.
Yeah. And at one point, especially during the whole pandemic, during that period, we had trafficking like crazy. We were top in the country, and kids were getting stolen from our number one that we often hear. People think, oh, it's just Arizona Mills, and that's a hub where kids get trafficked. No, they are getting taken from the Costco's, from your local neighborhoods. So as much as people don't want to talk about it, you have to, and not wait until it's happening to someone or to your child or to yourself, because at the end of the day, you have to protect the children. They're innocent, right. And we have to not only defend them, but our constitutional rights as well.
Yeah, that is a great point, Bridget. You're exactly right. The children are going missing all across this country. And then you have the cartel bringing more children in whose parents aren't here. They've been used as a pawn in this whole cartel organization, oftentimes being put into the trafficking and the sex trade here in America. Last year, the NCMEC, which is the FBI had 365,000 entries for missing children. The year prior to that in 20, and it's not getting better. The only reason 2020 was lower was because of the what do you call it? The pandemic.
Pandemic.
The only reason that there was less this last year is because more kids were home.
Yep.
But 365,000 went missing last year, 424,000 the year before, 421,000 the year before that, 400,000. And then you get NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They think it's closer to 500, 600, even up to 800,000 children that may go missing that are not being reported as well. So to me, that's a big problem. You know, when I came and spoke at the church, I talk about this,
Yep.
the impact on this. When COVID started, we shut this country down for 10,000 COVID deaths. We had 365,000 children go put in the system as missing last year.
Yep.
And where was the outrage? Where was your government officials talking about that issue?
Right.
That is what I'm passionate about. People are being taken, trafficked, runaways that parents are letting go. Whatever it is, we have a major problem with missing children in this country, and we need to fix it.
And it's not like 375,000 go missing and we find 375,000 by the end of the year. Even if we find some of them, we're now saying 300,000 this year, 400,000 the year before, 400,000 the year before. And now we're at 1.1 million children in 3 years that are missing. And that's probably, like you said, a low estimate. And there is not one person who is upset about any of this. And to me, it's just, but they don't, I mean, it blows my mind, but they don't want you to know. They don't announce that. If we announce that stuff, people would be freaking out and it would be over like that. But they don't want you to know this stuff. They don't want, they just close it all down. Oh no, that's not real. That's not real. Okay.
Well, and if they don't like your voice, if they don't like your politics, they can shut you down, but they make no effort to shut down child pornography.
Exactly.
So you have the ability to stop it because you're stopping dissenting voices that you don't like, opinions, political opinions that you don't like, but you're unwilling to take the child pornography off the internet. And so, you know, that should be alarming to the American people. Like, where are our priorities as a country, as a government? Have we lost our way? As our moral line that we should have? Is it so distorted? I don't know, but I would think that our government officials would be working a lot harder to shut down the amount of child pornography in this country.
Right.
Going back to the border, one thing I want to talk about is most people often hear mainstream media and what's being pushed, and they think the impact on the Hispanic and the African American community, and they just hear, oh, they don't want those crossing the border and the illegals. What people don't realize, especially when you get into trafficking, is some of these people and some of these kids are born into it. So they're coming without birth certificates, meaning when you get into trafficking, they're literally making money and breeding babies and they don't have a parent. They are just literally it turns into trafficking, and then they're put on the street to go work, whether it be the drug smuggling, or there's so many different lines of trafficking. And one thing that stuck with me, especially when we heard you speak, was like that there's some babies and some children who are coming across the border that aren't even breathing, and they're walking across that border and they're playing a role in the whole trafficking piece and drug smuggling.
Absolutely. These kids are being used as pawns, and these kids, we've had other sheriff's offices stop cars where the kids in the back had no idea who the people in the front of the car were, and the people in the front had no idea who the kids were. And you have to be naive to believe that these children who are now in these groups of men that are coming into this country, you have to be naive to believe that they're not being abused in some way, or that the likelihood of them being abused is not there. They are being abused, and it's sad. So just to give you an idea, they I think in the Tucson sector in the last quarter they stopped 155,000 people. One of the problems is they're seeing almost a 600, I think it was a 570% increase in
Wow.
people with criminal histories amongst those people.
Yikes.
Now, those are criminal histories from here. Men, women, primarily men who have been convicted of a crime here, got sent back to their country, and now they're back in our country again. And do you know what? 80% of those that are being caught are sex offenders. Of those people that have a criminal record, the majority of them are sex offenders from this country before. And we just let them back in to prey on our children again, or to prey on somebody, women, children, whatever it is. And to me, it's so disgusting and disturbing. And yet we have a federal government who just wants to say, we're not going to secure the border. We're going to let them in. And people will say, well, that's the right thing. That's the humanitarian thing to do. No, it's not.
It's not.
The humanitarian thing to do would be to not tolerate this behavior, to create a platform for the cartel to abuse children and women. That's the humanitarian thing. And the humanitarian thing is border security. We have a system in place, whether you like it or don't, that allows people to come to this country legally. And what we're saying is follow those rules. That's already in place. That's our humanitarian way. Yep. But don't aid and abet the cartel in their abuse of human beings.
Yeah.
Well, and if you ever look at the desert out there, if you've ever seen pictures of these people coming across the desert, and you want to be an environmentalist and all of this climate control and all that stuff, go take a look at what they do to our desert and the trash that they leave out there, and just the filth, and then start having that conversation. If human trafficking and drug trafficking isn't your thing, but environmentalism is, well, then start there too, because now you also have that issue with all of the garbage and trash that they've left out there for nobody to pick up, in the world to go to hell that way too. So there's always a way to find your piece to be against this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's those same environmentalists who will squawk about everything are nowhere to be found. They're quiet as a church house mouse when it comes to the amount of trash that the cartel, the people that the cartel traffics into this country leave in our desert areas.
Yep.
And so many people are like, well, I'm just one voice, I can't do anything. The power of one and one voice, you never know where that will go. And now it would have probably been a year ago, but at the beginning of the whole pandemic, there was a lady who happened to walk into my office at work, and we were helping her, and we just asked her, hi, how can we help you? Because we didn't recognize her in our area. So she's like, she was freaking out. She's like, do you know this guy? Does he work here? And we're like, no. And we could have left it at that, but we asked, my coworker and myself asked why. And she goes, well, he's on America's Most Wanted list, and he's from Colorado. He moved here, was dating her, I think it was her daughter or daughter's friend, something like that. But she shows us the picture, and he had been charged for, it had to do with kids, and there was pedophilia involved. And she was worried because whoever he was dating in the family had children, and there's red flags that set off for them. So they of course turn to social media, look up this guy, look up his history on Google, whatever. They find out he's wanted. So we're like, he doesn't work in our area or work for us, but let's print you. She's like, I just know that he works in this area. My daughter whoever brings him to work, they followed her one day and saw this is where you could potentially be. Because once you get down our street, it's all desert, and it's back in a construction site. So you would notice somebody's following you. And so she pulled off and just goes, I know it's in the surroundings. So we printed the GPS or the general map of our area. And she's like, yeah, he works on buses. And so we're like, well, it could be any of these businesses. Long story short, the sheriffs, and we're on the border of Maricopa and Pinal. but Maricopa doesn't always like to respond to us. They fight over who's going to come out. So,
That's because Pinel's awesome. We have a
Right?
sheriff.
Thank you.
right? So, long story short, the sheriffs told her, well, if you can get us a lead and get us some information, we'll come and help you and we'll capture him, but don't go and put yourself in fire. So basically she calls us back a day later and was like, thank you guys so much. He's been arrested. And so they caught him and he's of course doing sentencing now, but had we just stopped her and been like, no, and we not asked additional questions and her give us those extra details and us being willing to print more of like our location or say, hey, this is where he could be, like check these out. Or if you need anything, like we'll go with you. So then we printed also flyers of the picture and like the description of him being wanted. And we passed them out. She passed them out to all the businesses in our area. And it literally took them 24, almost 48 hours to then go arrest him.
Good. I love a success story. And, there's a lot of men out there like that. You guys heard me talk about it. The amount of child predators out there is alarming. We can put out an ad saying we're a 14-year-old girl, simple, naive. Hey, I'm bored. We had 60 men in an hour respond to an ad like that. 60.
Wow.
So I only have one detective that works those. So now what I have to do is I have to have that detective will work that case. We try to get the meetup. Then if they meet up with them, we have to write a search warrant on the phone. We have to write a search warrant on the house, a search warrant on the computers. And then you have to try to figure out whether or not there's been other victims as well. Not just the child pornography on the computers, not just the luring of the minor, but you also have whether or not they've had other victims. And so we had one that we arrested from, I think it was New Mexico or somewhere. We put it up on our Facebook, and then we started getting flooded with calls from victims of where he had come from, of people saying, hey, he violated me too. So, it is a lot of work just for one case. And so when you have 60 people respond and I can only do one, right. It concerns me that how many people are still out there looking for children to abuse or looking to lure them or whatever it be, or get them engaged in giving them pictures or whatever it is.
And that's a really good segue to something I read a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about earlier is so many parents think that letting your kids play outside and do all of this stuff is the most dangerous thing for them to be because of the white van with the puppies and they're going to come around and do that. And yes, there is kidnapping. We know that that does exist. But from what this article said, it was you have some huge percentage higher that your kids are going to be injured, taken, removed, whatever, based on them being on the internet and talking to these people. Who are your kids talking to? They don't have to come and kidnap your kid because a lot of times your kid will walk out the door and be like, hey, I'm going to go meet a friend. And now they're gone. And so the work for them is kind of on the front end, being on the internet or pretending to be someone else. And their job is easy. They just have to say, hey, meet me here. And now your kid's out the door. So we as parents really need to get our kids outside for once, because the fresh air is good for them. The exercise is good for them. Just keep an eye on them, but then make sure they're not on the internet all day.
And you're exactly right. The dangers that are posed within your home are greater than what's outside of your home. And I'm not saying there aren't dangers outside of your home, but inside your home, we would never let a strange man walk into our home. But we're more than willing to give our child access to a computer, access to phones 24/7, where they are completely at risk from the predators. And these are men or women that are very, very good at manipulation. They have honed in their craft to be able to seduce these children, and they are depraved. And they will stop at nothing. They cannot, they have these urges. I don't want to say they cannot control them. They don't want to control these urges, and it forces them to go after our kids. And then 2020 with this online school stuff and all that, we really left our children vulnerable to the predators. And we saw a real uptick in the amount of online predators. As if it wasn't already enough, we saw an uptick in it. So I work with a company called CyberDive. They have developed some programs to monitor it, and they've got some big announcements. I think it's coming out tomorrow, but they've got some announcements coming out. Parents need to start looking at things like CyberDive and different ways that you can protect your children. You're not limiting them from being able to get on social media, those types of things, but being able to put the parameters in place to monitor what they're doing is so important. It is worth every penny to protect your children from these predators.
Yeah,
and most of those are not expensive programs.
No, I actually use Bark is one that I have for my kids, and I think it's like anywhere between 10 and 15 bucks a month. And the idea is that it just literally scans everything you have it looking for between text messages and YouTube and all these things, and it will find. And there's a couple times that I've had to talk to my kids about, that's not how we talk to people or whatever. I actually and the listeners have heard this story, but there was my younger son, when he was in 5th grade last year, there was one of his friends was texting and said, well, you don't even know what my stepdad does to me. And I had to take it to the teacher because I didn't know what that meant. I was like, sorry, teacher, I know this is totally outside your realm, but I don't know these kids. I don't know what's going on. And last I heard, although take this from the 10-year-old's brain, the stepdad was arrested. Now, I don't know if he was or if he was just removed or whatever, but people didn't know that whatever was happening. And a company like that was able to help. CyberDive, I've been following them. I'm signed up for their like launch stuff that's coming. Their idea takes the exact same thing, but instead of only looking at the negative, we'll also look at the positive. So what is your kid interested in? What are they searching? What are they doing? So that you as a parent can be like, oh, you really like art? Let's take you to go get some supplies because you didn't know your kid was looking up watercolor on Google or whatever. And so I love that concept. I will probably have all of them.
Yeah.
And you're right for everyone else.
And it actually assesses the mental health. They have a program in place that doesn't let your child continue using the phone unless he or she answers some questions as it relates to mental health. And they're simple, like, how are you feeling today? And they have to answer it, else they can't move past it. So big announcement coming tomorrow. And I hope they have a ton of success with it because it is definitely something that's needed. And they've done a really good job of keeping their costs to where it's manageable for families to be able to get a product like this and pay and not break the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we always say it's a blessing and a curse for social media and technology. It's just depending on how you use it and your intentions of it. So as much as we don't want to put fear into people, we're all about prevention and teaching your kids, if they're going to use social media, then teaching them the dark side of it and the dangers. So that way, if they ever do find themselves in that situation, they, one, know that they have a soft place to land with you. And two, they can also react versus engaging and make sure to go tell a trusted adult. And as we know that depending on how deep they get sucked into it, it can lead to different types of where they might sneak out and they might go on a date. And then you never know, that might be, they might get catfished and that could lead to trafficking. Like there's so many different things, or they're stuck in now an abusive relationship and you're now trying to find them and they might be considered a runaway. So again, just that parent engagement is huge, and taking the time out to learn the most updated technology, but also learning the lingo that the kids are using. So we often refer to Protect Young Eyes, CyberDive, and Bark are the top 3 that we will say as far as making sure to learn and take the parent engagement and do your research on all of that. Also with the dark side and like mainstream media, I want to go into the defunding the police situation. I know that when we heard you speak, that was one thing that really opened my eyes as far as what it did for your department, and especially with the border being open and all of trafficking. Can you just give us a perspective of what that did for your department and what you guys saw?
Yeah, the defund the police is a ridiculous concept. Even I think a lot of the people that like that idea of defunding police, those folks have even walked back because they realize that term was not good. It has not helped, but they have managed to defund a lot of police departments. After what we saw last year in 2020, they rode that wave, defunded some of those departments. And I think every one of those has had to reinstitute the budget they had, if not more, to correct the problem that they found themselves in once they defunded the police. But we talked about it at the when I spoke there. If you really want to address issues that you think might exist with police, because I can tell you the statistics don't support the narrative that the mainstream media is trying to push out there. It does not support it. We have such a low sustained complaint rate in this industry, in this profession. These men and women do an outstanding job answering calls, making split-second decisions, and they do it very, very well. But if you wanted to fix some things for us, here's what you do. It's not defunding, it's funding more police. Like we talked about, I have one detective that deals with sex crimes with children. That's not enough. But if anytime you talk about defunding, my job is to ensure that I have patrol deputies on the streets responding to calls. So you're going to keep that in place. What it affects is my warrant squad, my child sex squad, my human trafficking squad. Those are the people that I end up losing or having to eliminate positions for. And we need more people because I brought this as an example. Let's say a deputy leaves his house. He's arguing with his wife because he can't pay the bills because they don't make a lot of money. And the first call he goes to might be a 1-year-old baby that's just been abused by the stepdad. And then maybe the next call is a guy who just shot himself because can't go on with life. And that is not uncommon to see a couple, 3 calls like that in a day. Now, what frame of mind, what state of mind is that deputy or that officer in to continue to respond to calls?
Right.
Not the greatest, but I don't have the luxury of taking them off the road. Those guys have to continue to work throughout their shift, and then they got to come back and do it again tomorrow because I have nobody to replace them with. I'm already short staffed. So when you talk about wanting to make a better society, it's more police. The rule of law is the strength in this country. And instead of undermining the rule of law, we need to start building on the rule of law and allowing for more police officers so they're not as stressed, so they can handle these calls appropriately, so that I can take somebody off the road that shouldn't be there and backfill his position or her position. So that is truly the way to deal with the defunding. Fortunately, here in Arizona, we haven't gotten into that defunding nonsense. And we're looking at, I know our state legislator has talked about doing some laws. And we've talked about doing maybe a ballot initiative that would address defunding to where there would be some penalties involved with defunding your police department, because it is not the answer.
Well, and people that say that, they're the first people to pick up 911 and call a cop if somebody looks at them cross-eyed. Like, do you understand what you don't understand what you're saying? Let's just say that you want to get on a bandwagon of, yeah, that's the cool term this week, and I'm going to do that too. And yeah, I see that was the narrative that they threw, and here's what's happening. But again, you never consider what these people go through. The idea of running into an area where there's gunfire, no thanks. That doesn't sound like something I'm really interested in, but someone's gotta.
That's right. And this job changes us in a way that we are never the same.
No.
It takes everything it has from us. And then to have your own people that you serve turn against you, and your own media and your own government turn against such an honorable profession. And I'm not here to tell you that everybody in this business is good. Like, I'm sure there are people that should not be in this business. And we do the best we can as administrators to try to weed those people out.
Right.
I'd love to be, we can keep going on this one, but I'd also love to talk about qualified immunity and explain that to people as well.
Yeah.
But, defunding, ridiculous.
Amen. And please, and I'm going to say this the last thing, please, when you see a policeman or woman, please give them some, number one, some grace, but thank them, because your community is safer because they're standing there. Even if it's something helping traffic get out of a baseball game, they're standing outside of a school, whatever it is, the very least you can do is thank them for the service that they do to this community, because they don't hear it enough. And even if they hear it all the time, they don't hear it enough.
And that's right. It makes a lot. We do appreciate it. It may seem like a small thing to you, but I know the deputies, the police, they appreciate it out there, and they're going out putting that badge on every day. And it's not an easy job, but they do it every day. So kudos to them too. And thank you to all those that are listening, that are police officers. Thank you for what you do.
Yes. Okay, please, what topic? Let's go to your topic.
Yeah.
So qualified immunity, you're seeing a lot of agencies. So the way they're shifting this now is they know that the defund the police narrative is a bust. And so they're looking at other ways to create chaos for us in law enforcement, hence the border issues and many other things. But they're also looking at other ways to attack our profession and to try to strip us of our powers, because they really do want to undermine the rule of law. They want to reinvent America. And so it's dangerous. They're always trying to figure out ways. So now one of the things is qualified immunity. The media and these politicians in a lot of these big cities would have you believe that qualified immunity, that term, protects cops from when they break the law. And it is simply not true. Qualified immunity does not protect a police officer if he or she breaks the law. Qualified immunity, if you break the law, you're going to be held accountable. Qualified immunity does not protect you. What qualified immunity protects police officers from is them doing their job. If I respond to a call, and let's say it's a domestic call, and there's a guy on top of a lady and he's beating her up, and I take him and I throw him off, and he hits his head on the table and cuts his head and bleeds out and dies. I was doing my job. I was protecting somebody, and then something bad happened. Qualified immunity keeps me from being able to be sued civilly, even though they will still try.
Yeah.
It protects us from that. And there's some protection when you were doing your job in good faith. That's what qualified immunity is. If you remove qualified immunity, it allows for officers to be held liable civilly without any protection, which means that every call that they go on during the day potentially could result in a lawsuit. And ridiculous. Even if they don't like the outcome, a traffic stop, a domestic where they think you wrongfully arrested them, a situation where, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And now what you do is you remove that, it leaves our officers liable for lawsuit. We don't have a lot to give anyway. And if every day I go out, I'm fearing that I might get sued for something, nobody's going to do this job. Right. And that is a big problem. So if you hear the term qualified immunity, don't listen to what they're trying to tell you it is. It does not protect bad police officers. It keeps us from being sued every day by litigious lawyers and people who want to undermine this profession.
Yeah, because that's the thing to do, is to sue everybody for everything. So
yeah, we get sued all the time anyway. And I'm going to tell you, if we did not have qualified immunity, they would be suing my deputies nonstop for every little thing. Yep. And I'm going to put that in perspective again. Yep. When you do criminal law, to find somebody guilty is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the burden of proof. Mm-hmm. In a civil hearing, it's preponderance of the evidence, which means if the majority of the jury finds in your favor, for the plaintiff's favor, then you lose. So it could be 6 of them say, yes, we find that the deputy's at fault, and 5 don't, then you lose. Right. And so and now with the way the society is, the media has turned people on law enforcement. We're very concerned about when we have to go to court on a civil issue, because the jury may be sympathetic to the plaintiff. And it's sad that we're at that point in this society.
Wow. I did not know that. So thanks for giving us that. Leading into that, can we go into, and once we heard you speak, it was so refreshing because you don't sugarcoat anything. And I love that. So it was nice to hear somebody speaking the truth and who has boots on the ground dealing with all of
Yes.
this. So can we go into your thoughts on mandating the jab? And I know that I heard your most recent interview on the news as far as like weak leadership. So again, thank you for being a powerful voice and standing for the people.
Thank you. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what she's talking about, Bridget's referring to a video I did where I said that we do not mandate the vaccine here, nor will we ever mandate the vaccine here at my sheriff's office. People immediately get upset about that. They make it a political issue, which that's not political. Your health choices are yours and yours alone. That's none of the employer's business. That's
Right.
none of the federal government's business. It's not the federal government's business to mandate you. Do you know what the number one killer in America is? It's obesity. But they don't go around stopping McDonald's and all these other places from selling hamburgers to people.
Right.
Because that's you have a right to stuff your face full of hamburgers if you want. For that matter, we don't sit at people's houses who we know do drugs and wait for them to do drugs and keep them. It's their choice. Now, can they be held accountable if they break the law? Yes. So why in the world would we mandate somebody to take a vaccine, especially when there's people that have health issues or religious issues that might keep them from being able to take that? So what I thought was a fairly common sense concept of standing up for people's rights, their own choice to make it their own health choice. Somehow that has gone viral. And I'm like this renegade, or this rebel who doesn't want to follow the rules. I don't understand. We're jacked up as a society if that's not common sense. Common sense says you stand up for your people, you stand up for your rights. And the only reason we're here is because of weak leaders who failed to protect their people in the first place, who backed off the line, who were afraid of the cancel culture. And that's why we're here in this position. I refuse to be part of that.
Well, I appreciate it. And I love that you're the renegade. That makes me, it's like, I know him. Heck yeah.
Right. Well, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I would say even people who do want to get that vaccine need to understand that nobody's allowed to ask you about it. You're the ones that are pushing this to keep going forward. I don't care if you got a vaccine. I don't care if you have herpes. I don't care if you had a colonoscopy last week. I don't care. Nor should we go into a meeting at work talking about it. Who cares?
That's it. And you know what's funny about that? People are so scared because the media and the government has people scared of COVID. If you just look at the statistics, it does not support that fear mongering. But let's just you take COVID. We've got everybody so afraid of COVID, yet I could go to a restaurant and there might be a waitress or a cook in the back that has something far more contagious than COVID that I'm putting myself at risk, but nobody's asking about any of those things.
Nope.
But all of a sudden now it's okay to ask. I'll tell you, if people cannot see the political angle that politicians and the mainstream media have used COVID for, then I'm sorry, you're blind. Because these guys have politicized this. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. People have gotten sick, and my heart goes out to anybody who's sick or who's lost a loved one. I've known people, I'm currently know people that are struggling with it. But these are things we deal with in life, and we can't be scared. My job, I live in a risk-filled world. When I walk out the door and my deputies go to work every day, we're dealing with risk all day long. And you cannot eliminate risk in this life. If you do, it's going to be a boring life and it's not going to be worth living. Risk is part of life. People get sick, people die, and it's sad, but it's the truth. And we have to accept that as society. Don't let your government make you believe that we can eliminate that risk.
Right. And I told my 11-year-old a couple weeks ago, he got some bug in his ear about dying. So he got scared of, oh, I'm going to die or whatever. And I said, well, you are, because nobody makes it off this planet without dying. So there's your number one. I hope you aren't going to die at 12, but here we go. I said, but here's the deal. You can find out that you're going to die in a plane crash, and you can never fly on a plane your whole entire life, and you miss this country and you miss this world and you never see it. And what happens when you're 99 is a plane comes through your wall and kills you. You still died in a plane crash, but you missed 90 years worth of living because you were afraid of that one thing. Don't live in fear. Stop it.
You can't live in fear, and don't let other people cause you to live in fear.
Right.
And when you hear somebody say, well, it's the science, that alone should make you dubious and make you want to look at what, because there is plenty of science that goes against what all these folks are saying too. So my stance is, I'm just going to go back to it. My stance is take the vaccine, don't take the vaccine. That is your right. I have my own personal opinions about it, why I won't take it.
Yep.
But that depends, that's each and every one of you's decision. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask.
Yep.
It's just not the government's place to mandate you to do those things, especially not with the statistics that I've seen that have come out from their own people, their own scientists, the CDC and all of that. So,
Amen.
Well, and thank you for also you going viral has taught a lot of people of learning their constitutional right. And people often forget that we, the people, have the power, and we have to keep those people in position who are in powerful positions. We have to keep them and hold them accountable. So that's one thing that people often don't realize is it takes all of us to make, in order, you need the police, you need them to get a warrant, trafficking, all of that. Like, so at the end of the day, we have to work together and be willing to hold each other accountable. And that's one thing that I love when hearing you speak is you're not afraid to call out the politicians, and you don't hear that often. So thank you for going viral, because you're teaching a lot of people about the Constitution.
Well, and I even had somebody put out an article the other day calling me a rebel, and they were like, he's one of those constitutional sheriffs. It's like,
aren't they supposed to be?
I swore an oath, the same oath that all these other elected officials swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. So they were trying to bag on me and bash me. They're like, he's this and he's a constitutional sheriff. It's like, yeah, I honor the
more
oath.
of them.
I honor the oath that I took. Why are you not asking why our politicians are not honoring their oath that they took? Because we took the same oath.
Right.
Yeah, I love that too, because most people don't realize what you have to face on a day-to-day. So how do you, when dealing with that type of adversity, especially in the position you're in and you're going against politicians and against the mainstream media, how do you deal with adversity and going back into the world that we're in right now where it's crazy and chaos, but you have to function through it every day?
I do. And it's taken me, it's taken time to really learn how to deal with this. Because it has an impact on you when you have people that support you, but you have people that are just awful and hate you for the air that you breathe. They just hate you. My wife and I, we really had to come to terms with a lot of things. I talk about it in my book. One thing is those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And the other thing that we always say is, no matter how much hate we get, we are determined to bury, my wife said it best. She goes, we just bury people in an avalanche of love and light. I just continue to go out. I smile. I stand up for what I know is right. I try to defend the people that I was elected to defend. I stand up for my employees, and I fight for freedom and the Constitution because I love those things. I love America for what it is. I'm not ashamed of America. I think America is still the greatest country in the world, which is why people are by the thousands trying to come here to this country. People were trying to grab onto C-130 planes in Afghanistan to get to freedom. That's what it means to them. They were falling off those planes trying to get to freedom. And then we have people that live here in this country, soft Americans who don't understand what it means to be in America or what the beauty of this country is. And so, like, I don't apologize for it because I'm doing the right thing. I'm standing up for our God-given rights and our freedom that God gave us. And I do not apologize for that at all. And so that's how I kind of get through it. I know what my course is, but I will tell you, it's not easy. It is not easy. They take shots at me every chance they get.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. We've seen it ourselves, like even speaking, especially the trafficking piece and going so deep into it. And people ask us all the time why we're so passionate about it. And we get hit with it all the time. And they're like, will you speak more about that than COVID? And we're like, you didn't hear us about all the missing children compared to these stats. Like,
Yep.
so yeah, thank you again for using your voice and being a powerful voice for the voiceless.
Thank you. And I always ask this one question. I'm gonna ask this to your viewers, and typically people will answer affirmatively. I say, does darkness exist? Is there such thing as darkness? And people always be like, yes, there is. And I would say, I would contend that darkness does not exist. It's the absence of light.
Yep.
If the sun doesn't go down, there is no darkness. If you don't turn off the light in a room, it's not going to be dark. Darkness doesn't take over light.
Right.
The only reason darkness exists is when light disappears. When the sun goes down, then you have darkness. When the lights go off, you have darkness. And so my advice to people in this world, with all the chaos, with everything we're going through, the hate, the division that people are trying to put into our society, I continue to tell people, be a light. That's what the only way to defeat the darkness, is by turning on the light again. You've got to get that light back in there, because that's all darkness is an absence of light. And once we realize that as people, we just need to just give that love and light back, we're going to push that darkness right out.
That's fantastic. And I am a God-fearing woman. And so it's funny, we just had the conversation of the very same thing. And so those are the things where I know that I'm on the right track when someone else comes in and says the exact same thing. And one of the analogies I used is, if you're standing in the corner of a room and all you have is a candle, you looking out into the room, all you see is darkness. All you see is negativity. All you see is nothingness and void and desolate. But all those people standing out in the darkness, they can see you. And so if you can be the one holding the candle, you see nothing, but they see positivity, they see love, they see light. And then now they know where they're going. They can come to you. They can light their candle on your candle. And now you have two of you standing there. And eventually, to your point, there will be no more darkness, because where there is light, darkness does not exist. And so we've got, even though it's scary, even though it's unknown, we've got to stand there with our candle. We've got to stand there with our love and light, because other people will see it in us.
That's right. I love that. I'm going to steal that from you.
Absolutely. Have at it.
I always share the scripture, Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. It's one of my favorite scriptures. Wherefore, seeing we are encompassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was placed before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. And that's really what it is. You can't focus on all the people that are watching you. You need to be that light. You need to have confidence and strength in what you're doing. It's not easy for me. Bridget brought it up, and it's one of the best, questions talking about it. It's not easy, but I know what I'm supposed to do. And if everybody was against me, I'd still be doing it. It just would make it really hard. It would make it really hard.
But know that most people are not against you. That's what they don't want you to believe is, and that goes for anybody. Most people are actually with you, but the media, the politicians, they want you to believe that you're standing alone, and you're just not. We're more powerful than they want to give us credit for.
The majority of Americans, I go all across this country, the majority of the Americans feel the same way we do. 80% support law enforcement. Yep. This country, we're just not hearing those voices because the media is stifling them, or social media is stifling a lot of those voices. The media is putting out the negative voices that the contrary to what the average American believes, or the majority of Americans believe. So don't think for a second that Americans are not on the same page with you.
Right.
Mhm. Go ahead, Becky.
Oh, no, I was just gonna bring it back around to something else that when we go back into, we talk about trafficking, but one of the big things we talked about, the drugs that are being brought back in here. And you had some really, really large numbers of fentanyl being brought in and different things. And there was just an article, I don't know, earlier this month that a cop literally, and again, it's from the media, I'm not sure if it's true or untrue, but the concept is still there, that he opened the trunk and he was hit with fentanyl and they had to restart his heart multiple times on the way to the hospital because of the strength of this drug. And you talked about it at the conference, just where it was a couple of years ago and where we're going. And can you touch on that for people to really understand the power and danger of what's coming across these borders?
Yeah, the cartel, they've shifted from crop-based. So crop-based would be like marijuana, heroin. They still do it, cocaine. And now they're focused more and more every day on synthetic drugs. And those are going to be your methamphetamines and fentanyl. 2 years ago, when I would speak places, I had to explain to them what fentanyl was. And now everybody knows what fentanyl is. And so it has become mainstream. And this is what the cartel, that we are allowing open borders, this is what the cartels are bringing into this country: methamphetamines and fentanyl. And they're killing it, people, on an alarming rate. The story you told is about the San Diego deputy.
Yeah.
I believe it's San Diego County. He was looking in a car, searching, didn't even have contact with it, and had an exposure to it and started to overdose. They had to actually give him Narcan 3 times. He tried to give it to himself, but his dexterity in his fingers, he lost it so quickly, he was unable to. And if it wasn't for the fact that he had somebody with him, he probably wouldn't have made it. 3 grains of, if you take 3 grains of what is fentanyl, 3 grains of salt, if it was that size of fentanyl, that amount of fentanyl will kill you. So you can imagine if somebody's got 10 pounds of fentanyl, how dangerous that is, how many people this could kill. It's killing our youth. It's killing our middle-aged folks. It's killing the elderly. And the cartel is producing these pills, these M30 pills, because they know that as Americans, we take pills all the time. And so we're conditioned to that. So it's not a big deal to pop a pill, and that's what the cartel knows. So in 2018, in the sheriff's office, not any of the other agencies, not DPS, not Border Patrol, we had 0 M30 fentanyl pill seizures. In 2019, we had 677 pills. In 2020, we had over 200,000 M30 fentanyl pills come into this country. And that was with a border security that was working.
Yeah.
Now you remove that. We'll be between, in this state, I think they had a 3 million doses bust the other day. I think we'll be probably close to 10 million, if not over 10 million.
Wow. And that's what
doses that we caught. And mind you, I don't think we're catching 10% of what comes in here. So you're probably talking 100+ million pills that are coming into this country that we're not catching, that are coming in to the hands of your children, your loved ones, and they're killing those folks.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. Again, it's not a political thing. It's a humanitarian thing. And if you know someone who's ever done drugs or whoever has suffered with that, this is exactly why we need to have these borders secured. It's not about our state, it's about the rest of the country. And so, yeah, it's scary. And I wanted people to hear those numbers, because it's like, oh, it's not that big. No, that's a big deal. That's a lot of drugs coming into this country. And you don't even know, it's not like the FDA approved, not that the FDA has anything about anything, but that the FDA approves them, and they're all scientifically measured out pills. You have no idea what's in this stuff.
Nope.
And look, just because the FDA approves something, that is a government organization. Those people are all incestuously intertwined.
You know it.
As far as who works for who and whether they work, now they're in the government. I'm telling you folks, that doesn't carry any weight with me.
Nope.
Whether what the CDC says or what the FDA approves, because they have proven to be political in nature,
Yep.
and you can't trust that.
Amen.
I would just encourage your listeners to do as much homework as you can as to who these people are, and actually look for dissenting voices to what you think your opinion is. If you are pro-mask, find dissenting voices that are reasons why they don't like masks, and read both and educate yourself appropriately with real science, not government science.
Right.
Facts.
Preaching
So-
over.
Amen.
Amen. Mic drop. So our last question we ask all of our guests is, if you were on, we're going to go back to the parenting side of things. If you were on an elevator with a group of parents and you had 30-second ride up to the top and you needed them to know something to protect their kids, what would you tell them?
That's a great question. At this point, with what I know, I'd just say, because I don't think you can really eliminate social media or having phones. I think it's part of our society. I would love to tell them, hey, get rid of the phones.
Right.
But my kids had phones. And so what I would say is find a company, find ways that you can protect your children while still allowing them to have some of these tools, social media, those types of things, but also protect them. So whether it's Bark, CyberDive, some of the other companies, there are companies out there that are working hard to put things together to protect your children. And I would just say that is where your children are the most vulnerable. And probably the next thing would be consider putting your kids in a charter school or consider homeschooling them, because the public education system is proven to be political in nature as well, and are not doing a great job educating our children.
Amen.
And that's not I know I'm throwing a whole blanket, which I usually say don't do that, because I don't like when they do it in law enforcement, because there are great teachers out there. There are great principals, and there are public schools that are doing it great. There are also schools that are not doing it great.
Right.
And so I would just say, take more stock in what education you're putting your child. What kind of educational atmosphere are you putting your child in? I guess that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, make sure you're asking them, what did they learn today? Look over their homework. What kind of questions are they getting on it? What are their assignments they have to do? Yeah, make sure you're really looking into those things, because you're right. There could be schools that your kids are in a really great school and it could be a public school, or you now find the teacher that's doing all the things that they shouldn't be doing. So fully agree there. Yeah, that was a great.
And most parents aren't doing any homework on the teachers either.
Right.
They just figure since the school put them in there. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we've arrested teachers for as criminals, and we've arrested principals. So it's not that there are so many good people that teach, but it's not okay. It's okay to know who's teaching your children. It's okay to understand who they are, and make sure you go to your parent teacher conferences. I know the teachers would appreciate that. And it's the right thing to do as parents, to be able to know who's teaching your children.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. Survivors, as always, we hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Know that you're not alone. And those who are fighting, continue to be a powerful voice and be a voice for the voiceless. And I'm going to end on my favorite note that I took away from the conference, and you touched on it. But again, I want to emphasize it. There is no darkness. It's the absence of life. As long as people who bring the light don't get involved, you have darkness. Darkness doesn't exist if everybody brings the light to the table. And that was my favorite takeaway from hearing you speak at the conference. So again, thank you for joining us and being a powerful voice.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
God bless everybody.
God bless.